Welcome to the Natasha Helfer Podcast. To help keep this podcast going, please consider donating at natashahelfer.com and share this episode. To watch the video of this podcast, you can subscribe to Natasha's channel on YouTube and follow her professional Facebook page at Natasha Helfer, LCMFT, CST-S. You can also find all her cool resources at natashahelfer.com. The information shared on this program is informational and should not be considered therapy. This podcast addresses many topics around mental health and sexuality and may not be suitable for minors. Some topics may elicit a trigger or emotional response, so please care for yourself accordingly. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or feelings of Natasha Helfer or the Natasha Helfer Podcast. We provide a platform for open and diverse discussions, and it is important to recognize that different perspectives may be shared. We encourage our listeners to engage in critical thinking and form their own opinions. The intro and outro music for these episodes is by Otter Creek. Thank you for listening.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Natasha Helfer Podcast, where we go after shame anywhere we can get it. And I'm excited to talk about a new series here in a minute. But before I do that, I want to just give everybody a reminder that I have a Navigating Non-Monogamy group coming up in the next few weeks. If you want to sign up for that, it's a 7-week online group. I also have a mixed orientation marriage group that's also coming up, as well as a religious trauma group. And both myself and my team will be alive and well at the Sunstone Symposium that's coming up at the end of this month. We'll be doing some presentations. We'll have our table, so make sure if you're going to that you stop by and say hello. We'd love to see you. As well as the Mormon Mental Health Annual Conference is coming up. That's kind of aligned with Sunstone as far as similar timing. So if any of you are professionals who work within the LDS, Mormon kind of spectrum of folks, this is a great conference where we address all kinds of mental health considerations that come up for that population. You do not need to be LDS or Mormon to be part of the Mormon Mental Health Association. It's really more of a cultural competence and cultural humility approach to working with a certain population. So that's the news I have. Now I'm going to welcome you to a little series that I've decided to have. It's called Uncoupling the Myth, where I'm going to challenge this narrative that non-monogamy destroys relationships. After I did a recent podcast episode on this topic, I was flooded with messages, hundreds of people thanking me for validating their relationship choices and their lived experiences. And that response made it clear that I think these voices deserve more airtime. There's a lot of different things out there that kind of downplay or villainize non-monogamy. So in this series, I'm going to be amplifying real stories and offering a more hopeful, grounded, and nuanced view than what you typically hear about. And to be clear, as both a relationship and a sexuality expert, I'm not here to advocate for non-monogamy or monogamy. I'm here to advocate for healthy, ethical relationships, no matter what form or structure they take. So I just want to be clear about that. Now, having said all that, I am super happy to introduce our guest today, AJ. AJ, you go by she, her pronouns?
Yes.
She identifies as an ex-Mormon hippie who has moved from living a life of obligations and expectations of others to living from her own heart and desires. After realizing the conventional and religious life she was conditioned to wasn't serving her, she started following her own path. First, it was a career change. Then she walked away from 15 years of infertility and pregnancy loss, choosing to be child-free. And within that time, she discovered religion was not for her either. As she started to explore herself and the life she wanted, she created at Authentically Relating _AJ, we'll link to that, to chronicle her experience through deconstructing monogamy, exploring polyamory, and eventually landing on her own authentic, heart-led path she travels today. Thank you, AJ, so much for being on our show today.
Hi, Natasha. Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
I love it. I'm so glad you reached out.
Me too.
So let's get started. Yeah, just tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you come to, how did you grow up? How did you come to be in Mormon land of all the different traditions that could be out there, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in California, San Francisco Bay Area, and I joined the Mormon church as a teenager in the 90s. There was this weird, strange, teenage girl revival of, there were about 4 of us at the time that were kind of all friends, joined the church. And because I had a secular upbringing, I didn't necessarily take seriously all the tenets of Mormonism. And then I had this boyfriend in high school and we did teenage things. My parents were like, yeah, try alcohol. We don't really care. And so because of that, it didn't really impress on me so hard all of the standards of worthiness of the Mormon church. And then this said, boy, we got married because that's what you do when you're young. And yeah, anyway, got married at 22 and moved to Rexburg. And so that's when things got more entrenched in the church because I was determined to go to the temple and have the marriage sealed and all of that. And so trying to repent for something I didn't feel bad for was kind of strange, premarital sex and all these things. And I spent a couple years really diving in hard to the church. Living in Rexburg, kind of couldn't help it. It was all around me. And during that time, also started really experiencing infertility. I thought, I get off the pill, I'm going to get pregnant. That's just what happens. Even though I had had more of a California sex education as a teenager, it still was not comprehensive and very helpful. And I just thought, you have to avoid pregnancy at all costs because you do the thing, you're going to get pregnant. And I didn't. And then years later, I didn't. So that really started to put things on my shelf and make it quite heavy. Just feeling like I didn't matter in the church, stopped going to church on Mother's Day, hearing those really harmful messages that, as a woman, you're supposed to be a mother above all else. So my shelf started to get pretty heavy over the years, and going through infertility treatments, not getting pregnant. In my early 30s, I said, I want to take a break from this. I don't really want to try to have a baby right now. We're still young. We still have a good 10 years maybe. And at that time, I started to think I should probably really figure church out because I was kind of in, kind of out. We'd go every once in a while when it suited us, but I just didn't take it super seriously. At this time, was living back in California. And then I actually heard from a friend from high school who I don't know where she is now or anything about her, but she reached out to me and she said, she was Mormon at the time, and she said, hey, you were really non-judgmental and very compassionate, and my husband he's kind of leaving the church, and I don't know what to do, and I don't know who to talk to, and this was in 2015. And I said, oh, what's he doing? And she said, he's reading these things called the Gospel Topic Essays. And I'm like, oh, I haven't heard of those. So I pulled him up, read the one about Joseph Smith, which I was a teen convert, so Joseph Smith's story really touched me. I read the one about the first vision, and in an instant, I was like, oh, this is all made up. This whole thing is not true. Dove into my deconstruction and continued with infertility, went through some pregnancy loss, decided this is not for me. I do not want to try to force my body to do something it's not doing. This is making me miserable. And started listening to Year of Polygamy.
Okay.
Yeah. And there was an episode in Year of Polygamy, I can't remember which one or anything, where the Lindsay Henson Park was her name at the time when she hosted it. She was reading an account of two sister wives, their journals. And for all intents and purposes, that lifestyle actually was good for them. It was working for them. Their husband seemed to be a kind, caring man, putting aside all the other polygamy that is present with Mormon church history. These two women seem to have a very loving, caring experience. And it was kind of questionable whether they were also romantically involved as well. Mm-hmm. And listening to that, something really deep hit me. And I thought, oh, I want a wife. Where did that come from? Like, where did that go? And I had left the church and I was like deep into listening to the Year of Polygamy and just deconstructing all of that. Felt like a disaffected convert, listening to Zelf on the Shelf and things, and just trying to kind of slough away all of that and discover who I was. And I told my spouse at the time, and he kind of started joking too, like, well, what if I had a wife and she lived with us? I'm like, well, I want a wife, and I'm annoyingly straight. Like, annoyingly straight is what I call it. And I sat with that for a while. What does this really mean to me? And a couple years went by, and he and I just kind of joked about what if this, what if that? Well, if you have a wife, can I have a boyfriend? And these little just pings that felt kind of silly and fun to entertain. And one day it went a little further with the teasing than I felt comfortable with, and I let him know. I said, "Hey, I this is starting to hurt. This is confronting, and I'm not sure what's going on and why I feel this way." And we stopped, and then COVID hit, and I was living in California, so everything shut down very drastically.
Mm-hmm.
And we were face to face, living in a small cottage, just at each other's neck all the time, and found a therapist. The serendipity of this is so cool. Through a yoga friend, I'm a yoga teacher, and she found this therapist on BetterHelp, and she recommended her to me. And she said, I think that you'll really like her. But more than that, I think your spouse will really like her. Because I had known her for 5 or 6 years, and she kind of knew what was going on with me. And so I reached out to this therapist. She was no longer on BetterHelp. Turns out, completely unadvertised, she was ex-Mormon and queer and polyam affirming. And I had no idea. And she was in California. So doing some telehealth, probably about a month into it, he and I were sitting there and looking at her on the screen. And in that session, he turned and looked at me and he said, I'm polyamorous. And I went, oh, yes, you are. And so many things just clicked into place and made sense. Yeah.
He had never identified like that before.
Mm-mm.
You hadn't ever really thought about that term as an identifying factor.
No, not at all.
Why did everything click into place? Like what started clicking into place now looking back?
Yeah. Wanting to be sensitive to not really share his stuff. Just, I had known him since we were teenagers. And so there were things that I'm like, yeah, I think I could have seen you in high school with several girlfriends and things like that. Yeah. And just some other things that just seemed to all of a sudden land with so much clarity. And that was interesting. So we dove into that with therapy. And I didn't know for myself. And I told him, I'm not interested in holding you back from who you are. So if this relationship, if this marriage is not in alignment with what you want, we're working with a therapist now, let's figure it out. Of course, that wasn't easy to say. It was very painful. It was hard realizations to come to. And not having kids, there was more space to explore and navigate this, which I am actually quite grateful for looking back now. And I left it alone for about a month. And I'm a researcher. I dive in, I obsess over things. I left it alone for about a month, and he looked at me, he's like, you're not reading any books? You're not listening to any podcasts? I'm like, no, I don't know. And then all of a sudden something clicked one day for myself, and I started just voraciously consuming, Jessica Fern's books, Polywise and Polysecure. One of them hadn't come out yet. The Ethical Slut, listening to podcasts, and really discovering who I was and what I wanted relationally. And at the time and this would have happened before therapy, like separate bedrooms and stuff, because we just needed some space. It was COVID and needed some autonomous space. And I woke up one day and I was so angry. And I thought, I didn't consent to monogamy. I just had this huge realization. I did not consent to this. And the deconstruction that started to take place was deeper and more ingrained than my deconstruction from the church, because I started to look at how mononormative society is and how Disney-fied relationships are, and fairy tales and rom-coms and even pop music. It's so mononormative. And I started to see it everywhere and think, I never got to choose whether I wanted this or not. I had to do it because it's what everybody expected of me. I was obligated to it. It was conditioned, socialized into me from the time I was just a tiny little girl. You're going to be a bride one day, and all of these things. So yeah, I was really angry when I realized I had not been able to consciously consent to monogamy.
Yeah. And so let's talk about that a little further, because obviously you probably consented to a marriage. It's not like you were in an arranged marriage, right?
Sure.
Help people understand why you would say I didn't consent to monogamy. It sounds to me like you're saying no other relationship structure was ever even posited as possible throughout my entire societal experience. Is that what
Yes.
you're meaning by that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I wasn't presented with any options. Even if I was, I don't remember. It was probably some small counterculture, pop culture blip in a song or something. And, maybe my mom or aunt said, like, oh, yeah, that's gross, or swingers knew about key parties in the 70s, but that was just what they did back then. It's not a viable option for relating. And so just that mold that's created by traditions, by family, by religion, by society of like, this is what you do. You meet somebody, they become the one, you get married, and I've heard it called the social clock or the relationship escalator, where you just kind of you ride it up and up and up. You
Mhm.
get the ring, you get married, you get the house, you have the kids, you get the dog, and then you die you're buried in plots next to each other and happily ever after forever. So, yeah.
Well, it's interesting too that it sounds like not only had you deconstructed religion, but you'd also done some work on this whole idea of having children. Because I think that's another thing that's just kind of like presented as of course you'll get married, of course you'll
Mm-hmm.
have children,
Mm-hmm.
and then yes, I guess walk to the rainbow end.
Yeah.
But you had, I mean, out of own personal loss, I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to minimize the infertility struggle.
Oh,
I know
yeah.
that's really huge, but it sounds like that gave you an opportunity to really see life differently. Like my life could be great in a different way, even if I
Mm-hmm.
choose not to have children.
Yeah, definitely. It was a long path of infertility and then kind of culminating in a really tragic pregnancy loss that after that I said, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. And I looked at my spouse at the time and he said, oh, I've been done. And we both just kind of hugged each other and exhaled and thought, okay, now we can figure out what life is free from this other thing that we're just told we have to do. It's expected of us. Thankfully, my family's never Mormon, my entire family. And so I really appreciate that my mom never, ever, ever pressured me for grandchildren or anything like that. The Mormon side of the family, a little different, but yeah, I was really appreciative that she really honored my path. And that felt good to know that this doesn't happen to everybody. And it's not a viable life option for everyone either. For many different reasons I won't go into, adoption was not something that was on the table. And so it's not like, oh, you have to keep going to get a kid, to have a kid no matter what. It's like, no, you can actually just not.
So you had several deconstructions of things.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're like feeling the rage about monogamy having
Mm-hmm.
been something that was really just kind of shoved down all of our throats as
Yeah.
the option. So tell me
Yeah.
about what ended up happening there as far as like your anger. Now I'm guessing you're talking to your spouse at the time about all of this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We're actively in therapy about it. This was early mid 2021. So we're exploring the apps, like Field and OkCupid. And that was not my thing, but I tried it because I thought it's okay to be curious and try. And that was really actually enlivening just to think, oh, I can do this. I can start to explore what feels good to me. And also, like, my spouse and I were doing this together. We're supporting each other. We're having conversations about it. We have a really good therapist who is kind of scaffolding us through this. And I started, because it was COVID and I wasn't working and I had ample time, I started journaling a lot. I started walking, listening to podcasts more, just like moving a lot, doing a lot of yoga to fuel my rage or move through my rage. And I didn't mean to do this, but I woke up on Valentine's Day in 2022. I don't really like Valentine's Day or care about it. So the date is kind of odd to me. It's kind of ironic. I woke up on Valentine's Day in 2022 and I started an Instagram because I needed a void to scream into. And at the time I called it at polyam_exmo. So I thought it encompassed like polyamory, ex-Mormonism. It was a little bit shorter. And without even using hashtags, in a couple months, I had a lot of people on there. And I thought, okay, maybe I'm tapping into something here. And I'm still somewhat anonymous, but I was totally anonymous then. And I just started like just pouring it out into the Instagram void because similar to the faith crisis of just that feeling of, am I going crazy? Is this just that destabilizing, like what I used to believe is not what I believe anymore, but I don't know what I believe? I was having that happening again, but it felt a lot deeper this time because this also had to do with how I was socialized and came from the traditions of my own family, which they're not Mormon. And so it was deep.
Yeah, wow. So you and people are following you because they feel similarly and they're having similar experiences, or kind of novel and different?
Probably all of the above. Yeah, started to have, I've actually had what you don't see is the richest conversations in my DMs. And there's a few people that we still stay in touch and we just kind of bounce things off of each other. Like, oh, I heard somebody say this today and it was so gross. And I wanted to react, but I couldn't because it was a family member. And there have been some really amazing connections that have come out of that. And I think I did tap into something that was happening in the collective. There were a lot of folks leaving the church. There were a lot of people, ex-Mormon or not, opening to open relationships. I think that COVID had people looking at their lives realizing, I don't know if I want this. I don't know what's going on here, but it doesn't feel right. And I think I just tapped into something that was happening in the collective at the time.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, not that we're happy at all that COVID happened, but I
No.
do think that it got people out of autopilot mode for a bit, and like you're saying, had to usually be in closer proximity with the people of their family systems. And I think for a lot of people that maybe drew them closer together. For a lot of people, it was a wake-up call. Like, what are we doing? Why are we on autopilot? Why are we continuing in this kind of humdrum or mundane or even toxic relationship that we've been in for a while? Yeah. So, okay. So then moving forward, then you are like, okay, I'm deconstructing monogamy. Your spouse is saying, hey, I'm identifying as polyamorous. So what ends up happening between the two of you, and how you start, like actually navigating this?
Yeah, we decided to open things up. We relate differently, and that was something that I still process and work on. That's something that didn't necessarily surprise me, but the lived experience of that is very different than knowing that that's probably going to happen. We're different people. We want different things. How he wants to relate to other people and how I want to relate to other people is different. And so went through that process of really differentiating from each other, from the codependency that we had in a more normative marriage. And yeah, so kind of happened around the same time that met other people and kind of started dating. And for me, what was so enlivening was, and I've discovered along the way too, I also enrolled, probably a little bit after this all started to happen, I enrolled in Somatica Institute. Not sure if you've heard of it. I did their 18-month sex, relationship, and intimacy coaching program. And it was therapeutic for me. It allowed me to dive in and really discover myself in very somatic, embodied ways. And I discovered that I'm incredibly demisexual and even more sapiosexual. So I want your brain, I want your heart. And then maybe I'll like your body. And so I won't speak to his experience much, but for me to discover that, I started realizing I was having all these like energetic crushes. And because it was COVID and I was kind of hopping online and kind of had a resurgence of getting into ex-Mormon communities online because there was really no other way to connect. And I started to realize, I'm like, oh, I just have these energetic crushes and it's fun and I can entertain them and we can talk about boundaries and, they can say, oh, I'm monogamous, but I can flirt with you. And I'm like, that's great because I want to flirt with you too. And I won't push anything because that felt really safe to me. And my therapist told me two things. I'm curious to know if you agree with this. She said, when you enter non-monogamy after long-term monogamy, she said, two things are most likely going to happen. One, whatever process you're in, especially dating and new relationships, it's going to feel excruciatingly slow because you've been in this relationship with someone where for a long term you've been exposed to everything. So getting to know new people, it's going to feel slow, and your inner teenager is going to come out.
Yeah, I would probably agree with that. I mean, I
Mhm.
think sometimes the inner teenager thing is used as kind of like almost like we do with teenagers, like we minimize their feelings by saying, "Oh, this is just a crush," or this is,
Yeah.
like baby steps or whatever. When the I mean, I don't know if you remember, but my teenage emotions were very vivid and very
Mhm.
strong and
Oh,
very
yeah.
real. And if somebody told me, "Oh, you cute little thing," I'd be like, whatever. So I
Yeah.
guess I think when we think about teenage development, I mean, I do think that many of us growing up in high demand religions, we were foreclosed upon on many aspects of our teenage development. And if you're a purist in developmental theory, Erickson, for example, would say, well, if you haven't gone through a developmental phase, eventually you're going to have to come back and rework that. So, in some ways, I think that's what's happening. I think in other ways, too, many people, and I don't know when this was all happening for you, but a lot of people that I work with are in their 40s, 50s when this is all kind of starting to come out, as far as like, and I think that's its own developmental journey that mimics some of what we're doing in teenage land, but it's not
Mm.
teenage development,
Hmm.
it's mid life development
Hmm.
tasks of rethinking what is it that I want for the rest of my life, which is what we're doing in teenage land too, right?
Yeah.
Like, but
Yeah.
now we're doing it kind of with the sense of, okay, we've got the 20 years of kind of nesting energy. Many of us did create families during that time. We were responsible for littles. Now in our 40s and 50s, usually for most people, if they had children, now you're dealing more with teenagers or emerging adults. It's like a different type of independence.
Hmm.
We're facing our mortality, which is an existential task, right, of our 40s and 50s. And we might be thinking what worked isn't necessarily going to continue to work. And
Yes.
I don't see that as teenage development. I see that as
Hmm.
midlife development. So I guess I would agree, but yes, and,
Yeah. Yeah.
doing a little bit of both.
Yeah. I like that. And that feels really accurate to what my experience has been. And in with that, kind of noticing like, yeah, this inner teenager has come out, but I've called it my midlife teenager.
Mm-hmm.
So that is kind of to the point of what you're speaking to, that it has felt I have more wisdom, I have more life experience, I feel more grounded. And there's that excitement and curiosity and openness and kind of freedom and autonomy that I remember feeling as a teenager when started to have crushes and be in relationships and things. But yeah, it's coupled with that like midlife experience. So yeah, I appreciate you speaking to that because it feels
Yeah.
very, very accurate to what I started experiencing. So yeah, so started to kind of go that way. And yeah, I actually decided to denest from my spouse at the time. And this is something that is common that can hear in like the non-monogamy, maybe relationship anarchy world is folks might realize, hey, we've been together or we've been living together, and this may not be, we're nesting partners is kind of the term used. This may not be the most advantageous for either one of us, or it's come to the end of its life cycle, this kind of living together, which is that midlife unraveling, awakening, like, is this working for me anymore? And I decided to move. I had made a bunch of friends online in Utah. So I left California as an ex-Mormon and moved to Utah. It might sound bonkers to some people. My experience has been really good. I needed a change of pace. I needed a change of scenery. I've enjoyed nature here so much more. And I think because I deconstructed so much from the church and my family's never Mormon, yeah, I drive around, see churches, temples. I'm like, ugh, whatever. It's not something that keeps perpetuating in my life because I don't have Mormon family. So it's
Yeah.
been actually a good experience for me. So I moved out here in 2022 and he stayed in California and we did long distance and he ended up having a partner. I ended up having a long distance partner, not like in a different area. Tried that out for a little while, and it kind of felt fun because it felt low risk. It felt like, oh, here's this person that I'm in this connection with. We're seeing each other every like month or two, and for a short amount of time, but then they're going back to their life. I'm living my life. And so it seemed like a low risk way to try to date somebody, being that I had just come from long-term monogamy. And that came to an end. And I kind of dated a little bit and just didn't really love it. I didn't love it because there's that whole demi-sapiosexual thing. And what I wanted so much and what felt incredibly enlivening was just to deepen my connections and kind of approach things from what I ended up learning was more relationship anarchy of this connection gets to be what it is, unfiltered, unscripted. Where do I want it to go? And so I found myself going deeper into friendships, especially with men, and kind of having these like platonic romantic friendships that, it felt so good to like hold hands and cuddle with somebody that I felt incredibly safe with and have a lot of emotional intimacy and not desire sexual intimacy, and have that be respected and honored and met with that. And that was really, really enlivening to me.
So at this point, you had been married, right? So are you divorced at this point? Are you just kind of saying, hey, we're just going to go separate ways, but we're going to stay legally married? Maybe that doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
A lot of people.
We did kind of do that. And then I came to a point, I can't even remember. We're in the process of separating, and we have a friendship that has needed to like develop into a friendship because we've known each other very differently for the last 25, maybe even 27 years. And yeah, it's taken time. It takes time to allow that relationship to transition to something new, to something different, to something where I have felt a lot safer and it's felt more available to speak up for myself, to name what feels off to me. I realized in this process, because things have been messy, it can get messy. I realized that I had a really hard time being honest with myself. I had this inner people pleaser, this inner default to the other that was playing out. And so to come to terms with that and to really speak out loud my honest truth was really hard, because there were some things that just weren't quite right for me, that everything was ethical, everything was above board. I was like, this is just not for me. And I didn't know how to speak to that for a while. And it was hard. It created some conflict and a little bit of chaos in the relationship. You're
saying in your relationship with him in general throughout those years, that's kind of the patterns that had developed.
Yes.
Which is not that uncommon, right? I mean, I talk about protective intimacy a lot with my monogamous couples, and I'm like, are you really being honest with not just each other, but with yourself? Because how are you supposed to be honest with the other if you're not being honest with yourself?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of couples are struggling and I call it protective intimacy, because it's either I'm protecting myself from you. I don't want your response to what I would say, because I don't know that you'll accept it, or you'll be angry with me, or you'll feel rejected, or I'm protecting you. I don't want you to be hurt, because I don't necessarily feel certain ways that maybe you assume I'm feeling or wanting certain things. So a lot of monogamous relationships are dealing with that kind of that concern that are we being really real with each other, or are we just playing a role, right? And I think a lot of times, especially with couples I work with who have both deconstructed away from religion but are still monogamous, this is something they're really having to work on together. It's like, maybe for the first time, we're really going to be honest. And we're not that we knew we were lying to each other necessarily, but we didn't have a lot of opportunity or permission to explore certain aspects of life, of ideas, of sexuality, of individuality, of relational, connection, etc. So it sounds like you and your husband were facing a lot of those kinds of questions together.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I realized that was an ingrained pattern. Both of what you named was happening with me. I was struggling to be honest with myself because I was worried about the implications for me and what that would bring in the relationship. And I was also worried about his feelings. And I realized that in not being honest with myself or with him, I was attempting to make choices for him, you know, trying to protect him from his feelings or trying to protect me from how he would feel. And I was protecting myself from discomfort. And so it ultimately led to a place where I realized that the way we were both choosing to openly relate was not compatible for me to continue to be in a romantic relationship with him. And that took a while to process. That took about a year of just me asking myself, is this right? It's not wrong. Nothing's wrong. Like we're doing everything above board. It's very ethical. We're making agreements. We're keeping those agreements. There wasn't any cheating, which can happen in non-monogamy. And just realizing that for what felt safe enough in my nervous system, that I was operating a little bit more philosophically. Oh, I philosophically believe in open love and connections, and what's actually going to be safe enough for me to practice. Those were different things.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Okay. So on a show where we started off by saying, hey, we're here to talk about how non-monogamy doesn't necessarily destroy relationships. And yet here you are saying, well, my husband and I ended up, separated from each other. Why are you coming on here? Because you agree with this. It's not non-monogamy that's destroying relationships. So help the public understand where you're coming from, because they might be listening to this and going, well, see exactly what happens is this.
Right. Yeah. I say that we set each other free because he was in himself, like just as he is as a person, having to hide all of that and keep it stuffed down due to monogamy, and for so long didn't want to hurt me. And so that's kind of what came out of it, is like it stayed really stuffed inside because he didn't want to hurt me, and didn't even have, without a therapist starting to guide us through it, there wasn't language to speak to this in our relationship. We just didn't have the vocabulary to. There are so many things that I've said in the last 5 years. I'm like, I never thought I'd say those words in that sentence ever. And here I am saying these things. And what it came to is that relationship was, I don't want to say fabricated, but in a sense, and I use the word force, but I don't mean it like, I want a word that's more light than force. We were in this structure of relationship that wasn't authentic to either one of us. And so I don't think that non-monogamy destroys relationships. I think it shines a light on what could be. And sometimes what could be is not the structure that was happening before. And I made a post about this recently. I also think that marriage can ruin relationships too. Where, there's, for all intents and purposes, a relationship is great. And then when it's unconscious marriage, taking on these ideals, these obligations, these socialized roles, especially if it's very heteronormative. I'm the wife, I'm supposed to be doing these things. I'm the husband, I'm supposed to be doing these things. Putting that on could dampen a relationship. It can kind of hinder it or just dilute it from what it could be. And it is challenging. It's challenging to speak to because I tend to think that people are a lot more fluid in relationships than they might realize. And we're just not given space societally to explore that. It's still taboo. It's still demonized. Couples privilege lives everywhere. You go, you get on public transportation and there's 2 seats next to each other, all down the bus and things like that. And so this idea that you get an invite to a party or a wedding, you get a +1. Couples privilege is very rampant. And so without space to actually authentically explore what's for me, what do I believe, how do I love, how do I feel safe enough loving, I don't know that I think monogamy is just the default, but I don't know if it actually is for everybody.
Yeah. Well, and I think you said that all very beautifully, by the way, and I wholeheartedly back you up. I agree. I think monogamy works beautifully for a lot of people. It
Oh
doesn't.
yeah.
At the same time, when we say non-monogamy ruins relationships, we are automatically coming from a mononormative lens, because
Yes.
we're saying, well, the only way that non-monogamy could work is if an original couple who is coupled can open and stay together and stay sustainably happy. And then
Hmm.
that's the only correct path for non-monogamy, is already prioritizing that initial couple,
Yes.
which is this whole idea that that's how it should be.
Hmm.
And although I will interview a lot of couples who will tell a story like that, I think
Yeah.
it's a really interesting way to start the series, to just from the get-go say, the goal is not necessarily staying married for
Hmm.
marriage's sake.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The goal is to find healthy, sustainable, authentic relational structures,
Yes.
whatever that might mean. And it sounds like throughout this whole process, the thing that's really standing out to me about you and your spouse, which I've never met him, but is that there was a lot of respect, there was a lot of communication, there was a
Hmm.
lot of honoring of each other's
Oh yeah.
situations. When you did finally decide to open, it was like you're saying, everything was above board, ethical agreements. And
Hmm.
even with all of that in place, the two of you were like, we're not really jiving, which is what happens in monogamy by itself, by the way. All
Yes.
the time.
Yes. It's so
Right?
true.
Without any non-monogamous influence, there's plenty of people who say, hey, this is no longer going to work for us, this
Hmm.
monogamous structure. So that's another thing that I think is interesting, is that we never say, well, marriage is a risk for people to take. We don't really
Hmm.
talk, even though it's a very high level risk. I mean, I think the current numbers are somewhere between 30 to 35% of first marriages will dissolve. And then I think it goes up to like the 60 percentile for second relationships and up to 80 percentile for the third relationships. And that's monogamy, right?
Hmm.
And that's ignoring all the people who are also miserably married and will never get divorced for
Yeah.
a lot of societal reasons, or even financial reasons. There's a lot of
Yes.
reasons, or children, or situations where people are really not happy, but they remain married because it's either the correct thing to do or it's too expensive to do anything else. And so, but
Those are realities.
we don't talk about monogamy ruining relationships, right? And so I really like how that you're positioning this as an expansion that both
Hmm.
you and your spouse went through, and you went through it together and pretty partnered, it sounds like, until you made this decision to kind of decouple.
Yeah. When I was attending Somatica, a couple things that stand out to me is one of the teachers, the founders, was our teacher for the advanced training. And she said, if you choose to work with people around relationships, their relationship with themselves or with others, what you're going to see out there is most likely helping people face a lot of disappointment. Because sometimes we want to get divorced, but we can't afford it, or we don't want to have to put our children through that, or just any kind of disappointment in relationships, wanting to open up, but not wanting to leave your spouse, and your spouse doesn't want things to open up. And so there's it's exponential where you can find disappointment in relationships. And something else too is that when somebody mentions especially like a long-term monogamous relationship, when one partner says like, hey, I've been thinking, hear me out, open relationships. Basically, there's a choice is to stay in that and not open and kind of face the grief and the disappointment that may fall on one of the spouses. It is to outsource unethically, so to cheat, or to outsource ethically and to open up and to be ethical. And so that really opened my eyes to the fact that we have no idea how many people are talking about this, or even on a drunk night, with their spouse, just say like, hey, I kind of think it'd be fun to kiss somebody else at some point in this lifetime or something. We just have no idea what's out there. So these structures that are put in place, they can work. if they're conscious, if they're ethical, monogamy can be that way. It can suit a lot of people, but it's not the idea that it's the default, I think, is where the damage is.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. Amanda Ruth Wilson is saying, ah, yes, so relatable. Haley Romberger Lewis is saying, yes, the measures we use to evaluate relationship success, quote unquote, is so flawed. Non-monogamy doesn't ruin relationships any more than monogamy does. Yeah. And I think to your point, I would add even one more caveat. So you said the people who are talking about it, but then decide not to, and maybe there's grief and disappointment. There's the people who decide to outsource it unethically, so they cheat, which, by the way, that number is also very high. I think it's about 30 to 40% of all monogamous relationships will have some type of infidelity, betrayal. And just because I'm talking to a certain audience, it does not include pornography betrayal. It's talking about actual, like, with another person, right? Whether it's emotional or physical, another live person that's involved. 30 to 40% of relationships deal with that at some point in their relationships. So that's a very high number. And many people see their relationships through that type of betrayal. So it doesn't mean that all those people are uncoupling.
Yeah.
And then you said to outsource ethically. But the one that I would add is the people who are thinking about it and never mentioning it to each other. And I think that's a very high number, especially since we know the research from Justin Lehmiller is that this is a very common fantasy. It's a very common fantasy. And some people stay in fantasy lane around this topic. And that's lovely too.
Yeah.
Right? So people who just like, we don't want to deal with all the messiness out there, whatever. But through the creativity of our own mind, we can play and pretend and role play and have a lot of fun. And I know lots of couples who have a great time doing that. But that's different than what we're talking about. We're talking about people who are not mentioning it. And I've had several clients throughout my career that just the person bringing it up was such a deep betrayal that they basically had to do a lot of repair work with me, almost like infidelity but work, because just the thought that a partner would even consider that, which is a lot of this script that we have through, like you said, Disneyland or Disneyfying. I love how you turn that into a verb. But this idea that we should be each other's one and only. We're given the very romantic script that you should only have eyes for me. I should be the only person who turns you on or that would bring about that type of desire. It's very hard, especially for those of us who grew up in these conservative structures that fed us all of that on steroids for sure, and saw it as not only that you shouldn't, but that it's a grave sin to think about somebody else. That can feel very threatening to a person when you realize, oh, my partner might have interests in other people, or even just notice other people. And so that's really hard stuff that we grow up with. So you're deconstructing all over the place, all these kinds of things. So
it is, it's really hard.
Yeah. So what are you thinking about? Because I've spoken for a while, what's coming up for you? And also I want to kind of get a sense of where you've landed now. Like, what are you finding out about yourself currently?
Yeah. Being in this world for a few years and having spoken to a fair amount of people about it, whether anonymously or not, I have noticed that the couples that move from monogamy to open relating, whatever they want to call it, polyamory, non-monogamy, monogamish, there's all kinds of, ways to do it. And then it's so fluid too that it can't always be labeled, is that the folks so there's this idea of hierarchy, and it's a hot topic out there. It's kind of a buzzword in the conversations in the open relating world. And I look to hierarchy as not always something bad or wrong. There's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I see that it can be looked at as a way of order of preference or importance or want, instead of this forced power dynamic that could also happen. So I think the way I see non-monogamy working well, and I'm speaking to all of this with a lot of neutrality, I'm not putting any judgment or shame on these terms, is the couples who moved from monogamy to open relating, polyamory, non-monogamy, and end up being partnered with other people who enjoy being kind of what's known as a secondary partner. So a couple that was married, they might remain married or not, but if they're sharing finances, sharing a home, co-parenting children together, that's a lot of inherent hierarchy that nothing can be done about that. And I actually don't include children in hierarchy because I think minors are they shouldn't be included in that, I don't think, because they need to be taken care of by responsible adults. And it's not, oh, I need to take my kid to soccer or go out on a date. Like that, to me, those aren't, it doesn't count. So I think that there are some folks, and I have talked to them personally, who actually enjoy more of a solo polyamory life where they kind of date here or there, or they have play partners here or there, or they enjoy play parties, or negotiated experiences, or they really like if somebody's only available once or twice a month to go out on a date or to stay over or to go out on an adventure for the day. For some people, that really works for them. And so I think that when folks who move from monogamy to polyamory date other people who really enjoy like less contact with another partner, I think that those are the situations that I have seen it actually work really well. And what I've noticed also is that I personally didn't even explore what I wanted in relationships, romantic or friendship or anything, until I opened things up. So when people say non-monogamy ruins marriages, ruins relationships, if giving people space to explore themselves allows them to find their autonomy and freedom, why would we want them to go back to a structure that was stifling them and minimizing their experience? And anyway.
Yeah, no, I can see that for sure. I think, and you're right, there's so many different relational structures.
Mm-hmm.
I think too, as far as like, especially the post-Mormon experience, as far as the imagination goes, which I think we lack imagination as Mormons in general. But I think it's this idea that, okay, I have my primary relationship, right, which is that person that you're mentioning, like shares the household, the finances. We've been married maybe for 20 plus years, and we want to prioritize that relationship while we go and explore. And some people will do that through swinging, where they play together and they're always together as they play. And other people will explore that more through open relationships. Like, you go do your own thing for a while, I'll do my own thing. And then you get to the polyamorous stuff too, which is like, well, now I have feelings for certain people and I want them in my life more often than not. And so all those things can create different types of relational structures. But I agree with you that if you have a primary relationship, if you are either in the swinging lifestyle or you have people that are secondaries, that works well because it doesn't necessarily threaten that primary hierarchy discussing. And I would say most of the couples that I've worked with that are doing really phenomenally in this kind of lifestyle shift are doing something along those lines. Even if they do have polyamory, like one of them has a boyfriend and one of them has a girlfriend, I'm talking about a heterosexual couple, they've done it in a way where they feel like the resources are fair, shared experiences are fair. You're not spending so much more time with this person than with me, or, which, that's going to happen regardless. I have those discussions with people, with their friends, My spouse can be like, oh, you're hanging out with your friends, and it's platonic. But when there's injustice, that can be an issue that comes up. It's like, you can love as many people as you want, but there's only so many resources, like time and energy.
It's true. And I really think it's okay. And that's kind of what I want to like finish up saying about hierarchy, is that I think it's okay if everything is above board, is as honest as possible, and everybody is informed and can consent and agree to what's going on. So I don't see hierarchy as a bad thing if it's just being spoken about and agreed upon. If I were to say like, hey, I can only see you about 3 times a month because I need time for my spouse. I need time for me. I need time to parent. I need time for my friends and my own personal hobbies and interests. And this other person is thrilled with that, then that can really work. And so, I just think like honesty, clarity, communication.
I agree. I think where the hierarchy is, I think what you're alluding to is that critique of hierarchy is that you have somebody who's being treated as a secondary who doesn't want to be a secondary, right? Who wants to be a primary partner as well.
Yes.
And then so either somebody wasn't honest or somebody agreed to something without being honest, or things have shifted and changed. You may enter into an agreement, But then things change, feelings change, desires shift, and now you have to renegotiate something. Yeah, I'm a big principles of sexual health type of gal. There's like 6 basic principles. Honesty is one of them. Shared values is another one, which I think, and consent. Those 3 together work wonders in any relational structure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really important. All right. Well, we're coming to the end of our time. So if you have anything that you want to share that I didn't ask you about, or done a beautiful job of kind of expressing a lot of your thoughts and experiences, but anything that I'm missing?
I don't think so. I'll say where I've landed now is I do love to relate romantically, and I have one romantic partner, and we do nest together because we started a relationship open in terms of like, hey, this is what I'm coming at you with. This is how I've been living. I don't know what I want in the future. I really like to live by, I can't make decisions, speak about a future version of myself that doesn't exist yet. And so, yeah, we talk about like, are we going to be open? And what's going to happen there? And basically it's come down to the fact that if either one of us start to feel like, oh yeah, I have this desire, we'll start speaking to it to each other. And time being a resource that isn't really available for either one of us to want to date other people or to want to pour into other relationships. I'm really enjoying the depth and the presence of this relationship. And I want time for me too. I want time for my friends and all of that. So that's where I've landed. I can't say I'll be here forever because I literally don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I wish you the best on your journey, AJ. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your thoughts. I think not only did we attack the kind of myth of, non-monogamy ruins relationships, because it doesn't sound like either you nor your spouse would say it ruined your relationship. You said like it expanded our relationship, and then we actually freed ourselves from the confines. And it sounds like you're still in good energy with that person.
Yeah.
I think one thing we didn't talk about very much, I'm going to just drop this here at the end, which is silly of me, but we're also kind of deconstructing this notion that men are the ones who push women into non-monogamy. And I don't hear 1 ounce of that in your story.
Nope.
I see a lot of self, thought. And it sounds like maybe your husband was the one who brought it up initially, but you're the one who kind of took it with your own reins and a lot of your own authority, a lot of your own self-checking in, and you have landed in a space that seems very authentic, very comfortable and grounded for you, and that you're open to shifts continuing to change, which is kind of like the story of life, right? Like nothing stays stagnant, nothing stays the same. That's for sure. So
absolutely. I was not forced in any way.
Except for maybe originally with monogamy.
Fair point.
I think we do all come from that social structure. It's very hard to think outside of a primary main social structure. So where can people find you again if you want to market yourself a little bit, as far as your Instagram?
Yeah, thanks. I'm at authenticallyrelating_AJ on Instagram, and that's it.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Natasha.
We'll talk to you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Natasha Helfer podcast. To help keep this podcast going, please consider donating at natashahelfer.com and share this episode. To watch the video of this podcast, you can subscribe to Natasha's channel on YouTube and follow her professional Facebook page at Natasha Helfer, LCMFT, CST-S. You can also find all her cool resources at natashahelfer.com. The information shared on this program is informational and should not be considered therapy. This podcast addresses many topics around mental health and sexuality and may not be suitable for minors. Some topics may elicit a trigger or emotional response, so please care for yourself accordingly. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or feelings of Natasha Helfer or the Natasha Helfer podcast. We provide a platform for open and diverse discussions, and it is important to recognize that different perspectives may be shared. We encourage our listeners to engage in critical thinking and form their own opinions. The intro and outro music for these episodes is by Otter Creek. Thank you for listening.
There is a place where time slows to nature's pace, and there is space there to find yourself in her embrace. Some places should be left alone. Now tishki say the namo, so we can always go to the homeland of the heart. 10,000 years of our human history etched on her canyon walls, alongside Earth's mysteries. Some places should be left alone. Now tishki shade navu, so we can always go to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland of the heart. Deep in our cities, we sleep without her stars, yet still her presence sustains us from afar. Some places should be left alone. Now tishki shade navu, so we can always go to the homeland of the heart, to the home